Well, I didn't realize it was a game tonight. I left early.
Recording in progress.
We will now call to order this meeting of the Cuyahoga County Districting Commission. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Good afternoon. It is now 5:38 p.m. Calling the roll. Mr. Frost,
Here.
Mr. Kazel,
Present.
Mr. Lumpkin, Ms. Morgan. Here. Ms. Murphy.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. We do not have minutes to review. We will review minutes at our next meeting, I believe. We'll have, yes, we'll have those to review. So we'll go right into public comment. And I'll ask the clerk, is there any public comment from the webinar?
Members, do we have public comment from the webinar?
Yes, I have a comment.
Can you please state your name?
My name is Peter Petto. I'm from the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland.
Thank you. You may proceed.
My comment is in the form of a question that I hope might be answered at a future meeting. I was just noticing when using some of the mapping software available to me that the percentage deviation is calculated using the midpoint between the largest and smallest district as the base for computing the percentages, not the target population. And I'm wondering if anyone knows if that's reasonable or has some basis in practice or law. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Petto. And I do believe that will be addressed in the course of even this meeting.
Oh, great, thanks.
Thank you for the question.
Is there any additional public comment from the webinar? Hearing none, we will go towards the public comment here. Councilmember Jack Schron.
Councilmember Schron, welcome. I think we were informed that masks were to stay on. We have the, is that right, Andrea? I'm not the enforcer of those rules,
That's okay.
but that's my understanding of
That's
the rules.
okay. I just want to live within the four corners because I've never stood on this side of the podium out there. But thank you very much for the opportunity to address the members of the Redistricting Commission. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to make our comments. My name is Jack Schron. I am pleased that since the creation of the new county government, I've been honored to be able to have served under that structure as the 6th District Councilman for that district under the new government. I'm also pleased to say that the way it has turned out, the new county government, I think we can all, as members of Cuyahoga County, be pretty darn proud. I also would like to compliment the prior district commission's analysis 10 years ago in making the district changes. They made those changes by looking at the communities. They looked at the communities, the school districts, and all those aspects within those council districts. We as council have taken charge and worked hard to make that betterment of that new county government the creation that we all envisioned. We've worked together in a bipartisan basis. Today, I'll be the 4th county council person to speak before you. I've been watching the presentations. 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 1 from Central City, 1 from inner city suburban rings, 1 from as far out on the west side of the county that you could get before you get to Lorain County. I, as the 4th person, as far to the east as you get before you go into Cuyahoga and Lake County, representing both the east and the southern parts of the county. If that's not bipartisanship, I don't know what would be, the way we've presented ourselves. All 4 understand the council is a part-time job. We run funeral homes. We are full-time lawyers running law practices. Some are running their commercial properties, and I run a manufacturing company. Even though the charter has us as part-time responsibilities, You have my commitment and my promise that we have a full-time responsibility to you and all the taxpayers within this county. Why is that background so important? It's important because even with that diverse background, we all agree that a minimal amount of change, when there's only barely 1% change in the total population that took place, should be what the redistricting commission should look to. We also agree with Council President Jones and his suggestion to start from the inside and go out and see whether or not that minimal change can be accomplished. This is not being suggested for any personal reasons. This is being suggested because I believe this actually creates good government and communities. I'm pleased to be supportive of the new map that you'll see today presented. These maps allow the same logic of minimal impact on the communities together. As an example of the benefits under these new maps, in my community alone, 6th District, Mayfield Heights, Gates Mills, all stay together supporting the school district that's there. The only one we miss, unfortunately, is Highland Heights. Taking that also, what was presented in one of the other maps was the breaking up of Pepper Pike from Orange School District, from Woodmere. Again, it does not make sense from a community standpoint to be doing that because there's a lot of commonality around school districts and communities. These were examples that were splintered on some of the previous maps. The authority to make change in this district commission clearly resides with the 5 of you. With this authority to make the change, it can also bring as much by thought as far as what the district is doing and the obligations of this commission. By looking at the census data, with it being so small, I respectfully ask this commission to exercise the courage that it would take to not make catastrophic changes. Exercise the courage that will only do minimal changes as shown in today's map. Keeping communities together, though it may seem impractical by doing so, can bring little fact that more lasting positive change might result by minimal change than making drastic change. We can all remember our grandparents. They all
Councilman,
said,
can you wrap up? We're past the 3.
yes. We all remember our grandparents saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, guess what? With minimal 1%, the ain't broke is a minimal amount of change that needs to be done. Please make sure the fix it doesn't cause more problems than the ain't broke portion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sunny Simon.
Good afternoon. It's Sunny Simon, District 11. Just wanted to say I've had a chance to look at the new map, and I am fully supportive of that option. It actually equitably addresses any minimal change that has to occur. I think it's fair, and it maintains our communities intact and our representation. There's no evidence that there should be cataclysmic change. There's no reason compelling a map to be totally drawn again. So I support this, and it does no harm, but it does actual good in making our communities intact. Thank you.
Councilmember Dale Miller.
Good afternoon, Chairman Frost and members of the commission. Thank you for taking on this challenging service. The good news is that you don't have to do it for very long, and the bad news is that you don't have long to get it done. I address you with hesitation, strongly believing that voters should choose candidates, not the other way around, but I can add some useful thoughts to the strategy. I recommend that you get within the 10% maximum population deviation between districts, but not much lower. Being too fine on population creates problems with compactness, disruption, and preserving communities of interest. For example, Map 2 from Monday, which keeps the West Shore intact, has a population range of 9.3% versus 8.3 and 8.6 for the other two options, which swap Rocky River and Brook Park. Option 2 actually has the lowest district average deviation from the average at 2.28% versus 2.47 and 2.55. The 5 West Shore municipalities have a long history of working together and are a community of interest. Exchanging Rocky River and Brook Park hurts the map in 3 ways. It reduces compactness, moves about 40,000 people in new districts, and divides a community of interest. It is simply not worth making such a change to achieve an improvement in population deviation that is small and marginal at best. Map 2 and the new map 4 today show that it is possible to meet population requirements without the kind of disruption entailed in swapping Rocky River and Brook Park, and I commend this strategy to you. I do agree with those who said that someday the map will require more substantial revision. Compactness is not ideal, but today is not that day. You only have a few days, and you're on the right track. Thank you very much for considering my comments.
Thank you, Councilmember Miller. And thank you, Councilmember Simon. You were so brief, I didn't have a chance to thank you for your remarks.
Councilmember Nan Baker.
Thank you, Commission, and I've already had a chance to speak to you. I just want to come up and say that I appreciate that it looks like we were listened to. I appreciate that my district, at least proposed for today, is back to being intact. I know my mayors are pleased, my constituents are pleased, I am pleased. Had an awful lot of phone calls and emails over the last set of maps, so thank you for at least listening to the new map today, keeping what's there intact, and allowing our West Shore to flourish as it has done and continue the cooperation that over the years they have been able to perform. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Lou.
Good evening, everybody. I came in, I was so happy to see all of us here and 2 new maps. Out of our very capable consultants' options last time presented, I'm very proud of our process here because we already have a bunch of maps for people to think about in comparing to the state process, which is very disappointing. I think Mr. Frost will agree with it, agree with me about it. However, today I will have a very different ideas comparing to all the comments you have heard from, especially council members. I think this is a time we need a dramatic changes on the district. I will give you, you probably don't know me and because I'm a nobody. However, from my own experience, coming to county council to address certain issues, with any of these maps, inequities will be ensured. Because you still have a certain neighborhoods, yes, they vote for the person. Maybe this council member will be very good to speak up for them, but other council members will have no knowledge of the issues. So by the time when they check on all the resolutions, here comes the problem. Some of the resolution, they do not see the issues when in reality, ordinary people living day in, day out to struggle, they have to continue their suffering. So maybe this is a time we need a dramatic changes. So we can really break up some barriers so everybody will know what's happening, not just to themselves, also everybody else's. If we want everybody to work together, this is not, any of these maps are not the one working together. To resolve the problem, the long-term problems for centuries we have been having. Please, don't let this work intimidate you. This is a good thing about our process here. You are not politicians. Please do the right thing for everybody, for the principle of democracy, and to help all the people suffering. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo, and thank you, Councilmember Baker, as well.
Is there any additional public comment in the audience today? Hearing none, that concludes our public comment for today.
Great, thank you. Before we get to our next agenda item, I did want to, and I haven't discussed this with any members of the commission yet, but we received a legal opinion just before this meeting. I think each member has had a chance to look at it, although probably not to have read it in depth. I want to suggest that at some point, in the interest of transparency, we should vote to waive the privilege and to make this opinion public so people can see what we are relying on. As the commission, we hold that privilege. And so I would just throw it out there now that before we get into this discussion today, we could vote now or we could vote at a later time if someone would like to move to waive the privilege and release this legal opinion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion now.
Thank you. Ms.
And I
Murphy.
will second that.
Thank
No
you
time
both.
like the present.
No time like the present. Is there discussion on that motion?
It's the right thing to do.
Great, thank you. See no other discussion. All in favor of the motion, please signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, and I would just ask if the staff here, if you might be able to even make copies available in the room while we continue to meet today, would be great. Don't need to rush. We're going to be here for a little while, but if we could get those where those who are available, and then we will also make sure, working with the consultant, that that gets put up on the website and is available as well. And with that, Mr. Rusnick, we are on to our items of consideration for today.
Thank you very much. So much work has taken place over the last 30 or so hours since we last met 36 hours ago. And I do want to both commend the public as well as the commission for giving us robust feedback and comments based on the maps that were presented in the meeting earlier this week. That was the idea. That was what we were hoping to achieve, was to get reaction from folks and understand really what the priorities were as we move forward in this process. And so today, let me bring up the PowerPoint here. Today we'll go through some new sets of maps, respond to questions as we have previously, questions that we've received, I think, online through yesterday, and maybe a couple that actually came in today as well that we can share. Talk about if there are still outstanding decision points and actions. I think if I heard correctly, you did act on the deviation range now. So if you can just elaborate on what that specific range is, because it does impact what we are doing or discussing today. And then we'll provide an update on the outreach that has occurred in this very short process, as well as updates to the website that have occurred. So I'm going to start with responses to questions that have come in. There have not been, I wouldn't say there are a ton of questions, but several people have requested, or a few people have requested to receive updates. Those have been taken care of and provided to those that requested them. Our friends at the League, Mr. Petto, asked for the PowerPoints to be added and onto the website, and those have been added. There is a comment from Marcia Goldberg, who's been attending the meetings online, I believe, about some of the comments that were made by Councilmember Simon. There were several comments about the first district and Rocky River, which I think got elaborated, or certainly were we heard loud and clear, I would say, in the previous meetings. And then in addition, there was a request for other folks to be able to submit a map online as well. And that map has been received as of today, and it is available if anybody would like to take a look at it. It is here in the room. So I just wanted to go over those. If you have specific questions about any of those items, we can certainly address them, or we can move on.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, if you could turn on your
My
microphone.
microphone was off. Does any commissioner want to go into more detail on any of those public comments we have received? Not seeing any. Mr. Resnick, you can proceed.
Okay, so in addition, it is noted here, we did have comments from the 3 council members in the previous meeting, and I think what you'll see today acts on not only their comments, but also certainly the comments that we've received elsewhere and from the commission directly. So I did want to just add that, and I think at this time, I do think we can now I'm going to turn it over to Matt Cassidy from Target Smart, who's really been working around the clock in order to turn around a new set of maps that addressed the issues that were raised on Monday. And it really has been a 24/7 process for him in particular. But we did take at heart the comments that were received, the feedback that we heard, and applied this potential deviation of staying within the range of 10%, but being at +6, -4. And the result of being able to do that is a map that you see today. And that is, again, I want to remind folks, these are really draft maps for the commission to review, to get your feedback and to get comment. We're not saying that this is what you ought to do. That's not our job and our role in this, but it is really to provide you with something to work from. In the same vein, I would say that the maps that were presented previously were really for discussion. They were not, again, our recommendations. And so we're progressing through this process and moving on to a new set. Again, as you echoed to us or echoed what others had said, but emphasized to us on Monday, the goal was minimal disruption. And what that disruption factor is, there's not a hard number or hard standard for that. I think that is for you to determine and decide. And so in the maps that were presented on Monday, the changes were in a range of 100 to 160,000 voters moving, shifting, okay? The map that you're gonna see today shifts 26,000 voters, a minimal number. You know, and I was very surprised that we could get to that number and get that low. And I didn't think it was quite possible. But moving to that -6 or minus or +6 and minus or +4 allows us to do that. In all, 5 districts are 100% the same. 2 are 98% the same. And the other 4 are between 93 and 96% the same. So the biggest change is under 7%, whereas in the other maps you saw a change of 20 and 30% in some districts. In addition, by doing this, we were able to keep some of those communities whole, or some of those school districts whole that were mentioned as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Matt to go through them kind of point by point and one by one. And then I would suggest there's a chart at the end, it kind of after the maps, that follows. It's titled Constituency Disruption. This provides a pretty substantial breakdown of what changed and shifted within each of the districts, those who changed. So, Matt?
And Mr. Resnick?
Yes.
At this time, I just want to remind your team of presenters to keep their videos turned off until they're ready to present.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Resnick. Thank you for this opportunity, commissioners, to present for you. And sorry, I jumped the gun a little bit on turning my video on. I apologize for that. So, and I apologize too for the council members for causing a couple days of consternation wherein that was the case. But I'm glad to hear you find these options a little more agreeable, and hopefully we're moving in the right path. So this map, as Jeff had given some of the details here, it is a lot less disruptive. For one, that 26,460 residents are moved. That's only a little over 2% of the county's population, and it's 85% less than the most disruptive map that we showed you earlier this week. So a major difference. The deviation, and hopefully this will help to answer Mr. Peto's question that he offered earlier. And I'm willing to follow up if it doesn't. But so yes, what we talk about is the range of deviation, being 10%. So that's what's included here. So the lowest district is negative 3.86%, and the most the farthest over on the positive side is just under 6%. So that number is actually the 5.997%, but rounds up to 6% there. So that total range means 9.86%. So that's within that 10% range, but it's just shifted off of where the midpoint is not zero. It's just very common for the midpoint to be zero and it to be +5 or -5 in a 10% total range. But I think that it's more effective in this way, and as we've discussed, to just sort of shift that range a little bit. But it's often centered on zero because you're trying to achieve, in some cases, especially the congressional districts, where there's zero deviation and complete population equality. But it does not seem that that's the best for our means here. So go through the districts. Next slide. So District 1, and it's went too far, I think. District 1, in the more familiar shape, this does not change from the current map, and again, that has that's on the high side with the 6.00% deviation, but it's got Rocky River back into it. Brook Park is still in District 2, and so yeah, back to its current form. Then District 2, I think this changes only a little bit. Should have it pulled up here. So yeah, this changes minimally, and in part because it's Lakewood and then Brook Park, but then one of the ones that has part of the city of Cleveland. But the changes here, it's 98.6% of the current District 2, and then it takes only 1,500 from the current District 3, which is essentially equivalent to just one precinct. And then District 3, it just had again a couple of exchanges with District 2, but retains 96% of the constituents here are from the current District 3. So largely the same, and it still has over 27% of the Hispanic, or 27% of its population is Hispanic, just the same as now. I think it's about 27.4. So those changes just very marginal decline in that, but otherwise character is largely intact. And District 4 is the same. This is one that I think is been the same in every option. Yeah, and all four options now. Districts 4, 5, and 6 did, or no, just 4 and 5 did not change. And that's the same in this map, both 4 and 5. So in this one, 6 had changed some, and again, that was on the high side, so it did need to lose some population. We've still, let's see, read my own notes. So yeah, it has, I think all the constituents that are in it now in this formation here were in it before. The only thing is that it lost Brooklyn Heights, or is that?
That's correct.
Yes. Brooklyn
Yes,
Heights
that is
to
correct.
District 8. So just making that move was enough to bring it down below that 6% threshold that we had set. And then District 7, still all the way within Cleveland, and still the only district there. There had to be some more changes to District 7. Even though, even with that, it's still 93% the same as it was. But speak to the larger point of like what we had to do to accomplish this, to make those more incremental changes. Basically, all of the changes had, with the exception of the Brooklyn Heights edition, all the other changes happened within the city of Cleveland and adjusting those boundaries, because it allows for more incremental change when you're just moving precincts as opposed to moving towns. So that's how, really the crux of how we were able to accomplish this. And I think count was 26 overall precinct changes, 25 were within Cleveland, and then Brooklyn Heights is a single precinct town. So that's what allowed that, but 7 sort of being in both kind of in the middle to move that population and satisfy 8 and 9, and 3 and 10, like that ended up incurring, incrementally more change. And then also the other thing to keep an eye on with this district is that it shows on here 50.0, I think it's 50.02, the African American percentage. So it's a little delicate to try to make sure we were over that 50% threshold, that it was showing up as a majority African American district. So we were able to do that, but that was another thing to have to keep an eye on, especially when any of the changes sort of had to pass through 7 just because of its location. And moving on to District 8. Then District 8, again, largely the same. I think this is 95, almost 96% the same constituents, taking just a little over about 3,400 from District 9 and 1,500, which is probably just a single precinct from District 6. But we're able, and then also adding in, the 1,500 from District 6, so that accounts for the Brooklyn Heights addition. But otherwise, largely the same. And then District 9, this is at just under 95% the same. 105,000 residents come from the previous District 9. We made changes just at its edges with District 7 and 8 to try to get the population to balance right. This was one that I think we're particularly proud of, because it went through, as we were working through the process. I did not think that we were going to be able to minimize the changes in District 9 and in District 11 to the extent that we were, but we were able to make it work. And then District 10, this only takes 2,000 from District 7 again. It takes 2,000, so I think it was about 2 precincts from District 7 just to balance its population and get it above that -4 threshold that we had set for ourselves. So, but it's otherwise over 98% the same as it was previously. And then if we're able to find other places to satisfy the surplus deviation that was in District 6, and we were able to bring that within the threshold. We were able, and then also with District 9, we were able to leave District 11 completely intact, which is quite a change from the previous options. And this is what I had been referring to. I was looking on it when I spoke on Monday. It didn't make it into the materials. And then I was looking on it again today as I talked to you. So these compare the disruptions between the 4 options that we've now presented. The first option had 11% and 146,000 people that switched districts. And the second option, slightly less disruptive, it only with 104,000 and a little over 8%. And then the third option, most disruptive, 166,000 people changed, and 13% of the total population for the county would have new representatives. And then again, 85% fewer than that, with only 26,000, about 26,500 in the option that I just showed you here. And then this slide too, just again, sort of the check to make sure that we are not regressing or disrupting any opportunities for any, either African Americans or Hispanic communities to, elect someone. So like I said, there was just over that threshold, but we had to keep an eye on it in District 7. But otherwise, District 8, just slightly down from the current map, and same in 9, and District 10 is just a little bit over, but all fairly similar to the current map. And having 4 districts with an African American majority in them, it's still maintained. And then again, District 3 has the highest Hispanic population, so we went from 27.8 to 27.1 in this map, but still just sort of a marginal change. And these are the compactness, and now looking at them, Commissioner Frost had a very good question on Monday that I failed to respond to. But again, these are 2 measures to sort of show where we're at and compare the, give a mathematical comparison and way to evaluate the compactness of the districts. With so few changes, I think that they'll be should be very comparable to the column, the current districts. Most, I think 5 districts did not change at all. So scores should be overall very similar to the current.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. Mr. Resnick, is that
It is.
Does that complete his presentation on that map?
Yeah, I do want to just point out, if you go back to the chart, the constituency disruption page, let's see if we can go back if I don't, thank you. If you go to the one on the far right edge, which is the current map presented today, or maps, I should say, presented today, the far right column, I just want to, just to make sure you guys can see this in the, if you look at the share, it explains, for example, in District 1, it's 100 because it's 100% the same. District 2 is 98.59. If you go down to District 3 is 96.03, and then where did it pick up the difference here? Part of it came from District 2, that's a change. And then, for example, the reason, one of the things that happened is that District 3 gave part of its population to District 7. It was 5,000, roughly 5,000 voters. And so when we got into this, one of the things we looked at was, well, could we do it, along the lakeshore or something? But that brought the African-American percentage below, could District 7 pick up voters somewhere else? It brought it below 50%, so it was no longer a majority-minority district. And so that's the trade-offs that occurred and what had to happen in order to get, to make this map essentially work. We had similar challenges kind of as, I think as Matt outlined over on the east side as well with District 9 and District as well, 9, 8, and 7. But it is, I think, was described a cascading or a domino effect. The minute you move one, something else has to happen. So I just want to, just in case you need it, I think it is a useful tool and really useful information to see where those shifts and changes occurred. So with that, we can take questions.
Thank you. Does any commissioner have questions for Mr. Cassidy or Mr. Rusnak on that presentation?
Mr. Rusnak, the city of Cleveland is in 5 districts, is that correct?
It's in 6 districts. 6 as it is currently today.
But according to this map, isn't it 5?
Matt, is it 5 or 6? Should be
Current map
the current map
is 6.
6.
No, but this proposed map? I'm saying this proposed, the map presented today, is it 5?
It's in 2, map 2, District 3.
I believe it's still 6.
6.
2, 3,
Yeah,
7,
should
8,
be
9,
still
and 10.
Yeah, it should be 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, and 10. 6.
Okay, so at our last meeting, I think that I had asked if you could see if you could get Cleveland specifically into 4. Was that not possible?
We were working to get this map, the minimal disruption done. I think we had said if you still want us to do that, we can present that for tomorrow's meeting, if you would like. I can tell you that in at least our initial look at it, you will have if disruption is still the key factor, you're going to have a disruption of at least 150,000 voters, but it could be in excess of 200,000 voters. By putting them, shifting them into only 4 districts, you're going to have to move a bunch of people out of the city of Cleveland. So in just an initial range, I think we're looking at a substantial change by doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Yeah,
Mr. Lumpkin.
9, 8, and 7, how many, if you know, precincts were changed as a result of your estimates?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't hear the first part of it. Was it overall how many changed?
Yeah, and 9, 8, and 7 were.
Okay,
with the
so
Cleveland
there are
changes.
total, in the whole map, in all the maps, there are 25 or 26 total 25 of which, I think it's 26 total, 25 of which are in the city of Cleveland, out of around 333 or 334, somewhere in the 300 to 350 range. So it's around 7%.
The total amount was 26 precincts that
Yeah.
didn't change, total.
Total, that includes Brooklyn Heights as well. So it's 25 in Cleveland and then plus the one in Brooklyn Heights.
Yeah, we want to be able to at least articulate that too.
Yeah, and we do have that available, that list we can add to your information, so.
Okay. All right.
Yes, Mr. Hompian, I had actually spoken with Mr. Rusnick briefly before the meeting. That detail is available, and I think that detail will be necessary for the commissioners to have and for the public to be able to see, and council members, what we're looking at. This is a very good overview, but then, as we delve into the details here, so thank you for that, and that's something additionally you can make available to us and up on the website as an appendix or whatever it may be to this presentation. Other commissioners have questions on this particular presentation? Not seeing any. There's still discussion to have, and I think we will go into the decision points section of presentation from our strategy group.
So I think the question is really, what are your decision points that you have for today? Anything new based on what you have seen today? Any feedback based on what's been presented? Additional information or decisions information that we can provide to help you make your decisions. I think we've advanced through this process rather quickly, and so we can certainly take more feedback and make tweaks as needed or necessary if you feel, but if there is information that you need in order to move forward and to make a decision, we are certainly open to that information. And just to remind everybody, we do have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. I don't believe there's an actual meeting scheduled for next week. I think time allows for it. There's not a set time for either Monday, Tuesday, or I believe you can actually go to Wednesday if needed.
I do believe we have a meeting scheduled for Monday at 3 p.m. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair. It's a meeting scheduled for Monday, August 30th from 3 to 5 p.m.
I'll defer. A couple of comments on this, but I'm going to defer to other commissioners who may have questions or comments at this point. Or I can go first. No one's reaching for their microphone.
We'll defer to you to go first.
Oh, okay. From my vice chair, throw it right back at me. Well, one thing, because I doubt, certainly no one watching on the webinar, and likely not many here today have been able to read what we had maybe an additional hour. I want to thank the Law Department. I want to thank Assistant Law Director Zibrotowski and Law Director Huth for getting that to us today. That has now been made public, so we can discuss what's in there, as well as letting others read that. Mr. Rusnick, you referred to something at the outset about adopting a new criteria. We haven't done that yet, but we have been in discussion to see what is the right way to go. At our organizational meeting, we readopted the aspirational criteria that was used in 2011. And one of those was to balance the district populations so that the number of residents in each was within the plus or minus 5. That's where you all started from accordingly. At our last meeting, we discussed, is that the right or the only criteria we can use? And the opinion we have from legal counsel is no, but it may be the safest, with the second safest being this plus or minus, being the range being not more than 10. So it's not really plus or minus 6 and 4 on the other side, but it is keeping the largest and the smallest of not deviating from each other by more than 10. And so certainly this presentation you have here gets to that, barely. but it gets to it. And then the further my reading of this opinion is, though, that's not necessarily a safe harbor. So in other words, to get to 9.99 or 9.86 or whatever we were on this one, I think at a minimum, we are going to have remaining decision points of fine tuning at a minimum. But thank you. This is a good presentation to show us, yes, it is possible without completely upending the map. But all the more why, the first, no work is wasted, why the first proposals you brought to us were helpful to see as well. If we start, moving in one part of the county, what it does across the entire map. So I think we've got a good guideline. But the key for me will be that we need to look at the criteria, particularly the criteria that is in the charter. And we need to look at all of this aspirational criteria. And I don't know, when it was adopted in 2011, and I'm looking at Mr. Lumpkin, if it was adopted, it's got bullet points in order, whether those were intended to be in some sort of ranked order of 10 to the first. And if you have to go against any of these aspirational criteria, as they are in tension with each other at times, was it the ones lower down on the list, or were these in not necessarily a ranked order? But that is where we'll need to start looking. For example, it has right after balancing district populations, the next is to be considered consistent with federal law, neither packing nor diluting African American residents, and that under that plan, what is now the current plan, 4 council districts had between 3/5 and 2/3 African American populations, districts 7 through 10, and on down. So, Mr. Lumpkin, in a way, I guess a question for you, were those priorities in ranked order, or were they all somewhat equally aspirational criteria, if you recall?
Mr. Lumpkin, if you could turn on your microphone.
Okay. Discussion points, trying to deal with the numbers and trying to put something that was new together. I don't know, maybe there's another memory of that out here, Ms. Boyle. Yeah.
Just briefly, and I think Mr. Lumpkin is accurately saying, and just to clarify, again, Jim Boyle from the County Council staff, I did have conversations with the Law Department in reviewing for their legal opinion and reviewing the minutes back from the 2011 process. And we didn't see a formal adoption of it. And it's my recollection, and Mr. Lumpkin can disagree with this, that the aspirational goals were adopted more in toto, that they were kind of a list. There was not, okay, start with A, then go to B. And I think there was a goal that to hit all of those criteria, and if there was a situation where they wouldn't, then they'd reassess which one would be thrown by the wayside. But it's my recollection, and Mr. Lumpkin can add or disagree if I'm misremembering it, that they were adopted more in toto as just the in total slate of aspirational goals.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle.
Thank you.
Other commissioners? Ms. Murphy?
Could we have more discussion on the law director's opinion?
Absolutely. Do you have questions of Mr. Zipertoski?
Well, I just wonder, summarize and elaborate a little bit on that opinion.
I think that's appropriate. Mr. Zipertoski?
Sure. What would you like to know?
I'd like you to kind of elaborate a little bit on it, but certainly review it if you could for our benefit and for the benefit of the other public folks here today.
Sure. I think that maybe a fair way to discuss it is that the Law Department identified 3 potential and likely scenarios in which you will determine how you want to approach and balance the population and consider the deviation. We came up with what we have 3 models. One we call the Ohio model, which follows the plus or minus 5%. The federal model, which is a total deviation of 10% or less. And then what we've termed the interest model, where we could exceed the 10% total deviation under the federal standard, but then the commission would have to specifically state and provide evidence as to what legitimate and rational state interests are, or county interests in this matter are being furthered by that deviation. And in doing so, you would have to go district by district for each deviation. We were ranked all three of those in order as to what we think is the least likely to face a legal challenge. And we selected and identified the Ohio model as the least risky. The county does not have to follow the plus or minus 5% that's set out in the Ohio Constitution for establishing the House of Representative districts. But we do feel that if this was challenged in court, that's the first place a court would look after looking at the charter, which does not define substantially equal population. That model has the benefit of the -5 to +5 is also equal to or less than the 10% total deviation of the federal standard. So we see that as the least likely to face a legal challenge. The second least likely to face legal challenge is then the federal model, which is the at or under 10% total deviation. The third, the interest model, we see as the most risky of the three because it will require specific evidence for certain rational interests and a case-by-case analysis of each deviation. We did not include, as we were requested, more discussion on the idea of the cores, of maintaining the cores of current districts. One, it didn't quite fit into the opinion as we would like. And two, it is very wide open. The Supreme Court did identify maintaining the cores of prior districts as a legitimate interest that can be used to explain deviations. But they did not define it, and it kicked it down to the inferior federal courts. And I think they're finding it challenging to, one, define what that means, and then two, create a test that we could use to identify if is this too much or too little of maintaining a core. And no clear test has come out. Similarly, no clear numerical designator has come out for what it means to be maintaining a core. One example of a difference in definitions is, the core of a district a certain part of a district that's been together for a very long time. So in the case of Cuyahoga County, we have, since 2010, but other places there's cores of districts and legislative bodies that have been together for 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. That's one potential measure that the federal courts have looked at. Another is, more along the lines of the definition of the communities of interest. So that hasn't even been settled at that level. So we appreciate and understand your question, but we didn't include it because I think it would detract from the current memo, and also it is very up in the air. So we think it's better to maybe talk about like this.
Thank you. Ms. Murphy, did that answer your inquiry, or do you have additional questions?
Mr. Chairman.
No.
And Mr. Lumpkin.
Question. The law director, having submitted this opinion, what is the basis upon which there may be a challenge to how we employ this deviation?
Well, what we have seen in more of the federal cases are aggrieved voters that say, I don't want to be, this change, I don't like this change. I was in District 1 and now I'm in District 2, and I think that that's unfair. So I want you to redraw the map or have the court redraw the map because you are violating some rule. So in the case of the Ohio legislature, if there was a challenge to that, they would say, look, you are outside the bounds of this plus or minus 5%, and because of that, it's unfair to me and I'm aggrieved. With respect to the federal case law regarding how state legislatures are divided, what's being essentially alleged is a violation of the Equal Protections Clause of the 14th Amendment. we would see that as a possible challenge if the 10% would be exceeded or if we're essentially not equal. And then the third would be a violation of, I think, Article 1, Section 2 of the United States Constitution, but that only applies to the districting for the United States Congress, so the House of Representatives of Congress. That does not, we feel, apply in this situation because that's very specific. And to illustrate that, there are two separate diverging branches of federal case law. One is with respect to how, congressional districts are redistrict, and then how state legislatures are district. They have two different standards. The one is because it's based on the Constitution. The other is, or Section 1, or pardon me, Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution. The other is the 14th Amendment, which has a less strict.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other commissioners have questions on the legal opinion or of the Assistant Law Director? Are there other decision points that we need to be discussing at this point? I could go on and on, but I'm looking to my colleagues up here. Well, and I thank Mr. Zibiertowski for what I think was a very good, not only summary, but even expanding on what's in this opinion. Because I'll say, I know some, if not all, of the council members who were here, and he didn't speak today, but the council president is here as well. Council President Johns, welcome to the meeting. We certainly understand, and you can see have taken to heart the desire, and it is a legitimate desire, to keep the core of districts together, or minimal change as it's been referred to. We also want to make sure we have districts that will last, and that the county doesn't get thrown into uncertainty going into the next elections on any of these grounds that someone could challenge our maps. And so, as I said before, I'm going to repeat myself, but I think at a minimum there's fine tuning to be done here with some of the criteria or concerns that have been expressed by various commissioners. So that was one of the reasons, actually the main reason, why I had requested the specific detail on the precincts. I think really getting down into the details within the city of Cleveland, and I would encourage each council member and other members of the public who have an interest and concern about how these districts get redrawn to take a look. And even, I know that Mr. Rusnack's team has been very available, very accessible. If anyone has questions, they may want to talk to them. Those can be submitted through the website or by coming here to the meeting and talking on those to see, are there areas where, and I'm not questioning Mr. Cassidy's work, but where, he may be making, some decisions on a computer that he's working with and doing a very good job, I might say. I'm not criticizing it. But someone who knows those neighborhoods might say, it's going to make a lot more sense if instead of moving these two precincts over from District 3 to District 7, if instead we chose these 2 or 3 precincts to move. That's the type of information we need from the people who represent these districts currently and from the people who live in these districts currently.
So, Mr. Chairman, we would like to see as one of our decision points that itemized and listed out for us so that we can actually identify which precincts those in fact are in what districts as well. Is that?
Yep, and I know Mr. Rusnack's got it. In fact, I think we could have copies made and gotten to us now. I had just said that's certainly something I want to look at between now and our next meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
I would definitely agree.
I also want to read this a little more carefully.
We will also add those to the website, too.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see. For those of you at home, your sound is not broken. Your audio is not. We are looking at what we made. Do other commissioners have comments while I'm looking this over?
I'll just comment that this latest set of maps does address, I think, a criteria that we definitely wanted to include is minimal disruption, meaning that limit the number of residents that get moved from one district to another, and that is a valid criteria. I do also agree that what we have had here out of Cuyahoga County is really not a big loss of residents, and therefore that kind of works together, I think, with the concept that, well, then let's maybe look at minimal disruption. And I think you did a great job at that, but I think it may need some tweaking. I would agree, especially when it comes to Cleveland and what's going on with, it just seems like the districts that we worry about the most, I guess, that have lost population are 7, 8, and 10. Am I right about that? And,
I agree. And it feels like we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, if I'm being colloquial about it, while a number of areas, stay the same. That those areas that have that we have the biggest concerns about, the ones that have lost population, we continue to, pull from one that lost population to another one that lost population. Where I feel like it's a little bit of, as I said, robbing Peter to pay Paul, or to use another cliche, rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. So, I guess I'd like to see what kind of tweaking you can do.
I do want to also comment, we have at least 2 submissions, 2 that I'm aware of. I want to thank those who've submitted those. One is from the League of Women Voters. One is from Robert Dykes and Mark Salling. So I don't know if they're observing now. I know the League is represented here today, and that Mr. Petto is on the webinar. I do hope that the discussion we've had about criteria and range is responsive to the question that Mr. Petto raised at the outset. But I encourage those who have submitted maps or anyone else who may be working on a map that if you would like to make comment, and we're going to have at least 2 more meetings, it appears. I don't think we have any plans to add more than that, so it appears we'll have 2 more meetings. That if you have thoughts on whether it's comparing your submission, your map, to what we're looking at as the latest option we've been presented with by our consultants, if you have thoughts about the balancing of the different criteria, both that contained in the charter and the aspirational criteria that we have been operating under, we certainly invite that feedback. And so we'll be here tomorrow. And so those who have these submissions, they're very well thought out submissions. I can't comment beyond that other than they're very well detailed, and they certainly look like they all fit together and meet the general criteria, but I can't comment on them beyond that. But perhaps the people who prepared them would like to comment on them beyond that at a subsequent meeting. Yes.
I would, after looking at this, again, this is my first peek at it. Is it advisable that those councilmen who are affected most by the precinct changes, that they are aware of the proposed changes by precinct, and to see what type of feedback? I mean, having been a part of this process before, it seems like the public is always the last one to know. And so, given these changes that I'm looking at here, yeah, I mean, they may be minimal in some of our eyes and in some of the consultants' eyes, but they may be a pretty drastic thing in other people. the world in terms of how they go about doing things. So, and the person I think that would probably know more about that would be the person that represent them. So should they know about some of these proposed changes? It's just a question rhetorically.
Yeah, so the information has been shared with county staff to distribute to the council members as well.
Okay. And you're waiting for feedback from?
Yeah, we have not, I mean, the maps were finished at about, I think about 11:30 last night and distributed first thing this morning. And so they are already on the website, I would add. The new map, this map has been added to the website already for people to view or preview. And all of the data that we shared today has been up there for several hours today, so.
Good.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lumpkin, very, very good point. And I would say we've referred to Mr. Rusnick and his team as our consultant, and we're not disowning you, but you're actually retained by the council. And,
right.
and I think it would be appropriate that if any council member does have questions or opinions that they want to share, that I know that I've even observed that Mr. Rusnick and his team have made themselves very, very accessible to the broader public, but also to individual council members as need be. And I think Mr. Lumpkin's point is spot on, that the elected representative for each district is in a very good position to have information or to pose questions to your team. So I'll thank you for taking that time, both between tomorrow and between then tomorrow and our final meeting.
And just to be clear, just remember, if we are going to, the minute you move one, it usually means you have to move another. And so there's always a trade-off. Every time you shift one or two precincts, one or two somewhere else have to go. So because we're that close to the edge in a couple of places, it does have that effect. In order to maintain some of the other things that were other criteria that were voiced and priorities that were voiced earlier in the week, those were what you saw happening in 7, 8, and 7 and 8 in particular, but also it had an effect on 9 and 3, which then had an effect on 2. So there is the domino effect. One leads to another. So, and frankly, we had produced a different map yesterday afternoon that we thought met all of the criteria and standards. And then lo and behold, we found one thing that was off by not even, a fraction of a point, but 1 or 2%. And so we had to go back and redo it and kind of really do some shifting in order to keep the 4 majority-minority districts. So there's kind of the unforeseen consequences here.
Mr. Chairman, too, going back to the comments made by Mr. Lumpkin, I think that would also tie into potential communities of interest that we may not be aware of. So I definitely think getting the representatives on board is a good idea to get their input.
Absolutely. And I know many of them are still here and hearing us say that. So if there aren't further comments or questions from commissioners on decision points, and we're not wrapping up yet, but why don't we allow Mr. Rusnick to move on to the updates on outreach and the website, and we can see where we are.
Seems to be. Thank you. There we are. I wanted to get your slide. We're going to hear from Destiny Hinton to give us a quick update on the outreach efforts.
Hi, good evening. We've been doing a lot of outreach since, of course, last week. We've reached well over 500 people and organizations, as you see listed. We've been going through a bunch of spreadsheets to get the word out to as many folks as possible, and then constantly going back to those same lists and emailing every single day, as well as calling. So we've been having some folks make direct calls to the numbers that we have for a lot of folks as well, most of the folks actually. And We've been reaching out to elected officials, political parties and groups, a bunch of faith leaders of both individual churches, but also larger networks. The same goes for good government organizations, unions, the CDCs, nonprofits, and we've been reaching out to individual community leaders that we know and that have shared interests with us, as well as business groups. So we've been getting the word out through emails and direct calls, and we've also been utilizing Facebook. So we've been sharing and posting via Facebook and in individual groups that we know exist that are usually in tune with some of these conversations.
Ms. Hinton, thank you. Do commissioners have questions for Ms. Hinton?
I do. Thank you. This is great to hear, Destiny, if I can call you that. I wonder if you can share any of the feedback that you have received, or if you have been cataloging any of the outcomes as a result of your conversations.
Yep. Well, I can say that as we've been talking to folks, their biggest concern is, why didn't we know so much a year ago? So folks are just, they feel like, the meetings are quickly happening, which we know is happening, which is why we're emailing and calling. But that's the only concern that we've been hearing. And then other folks are happy to hear from us most of the time, and they're actually going and, they've either submitted a comment or communicating thank you. And, I'm going to try to get a group here, or I'm going to do this to see about coming down, or where's that remote link? I was like, it's in that email. So, yep. Mm-hmm. Oh, and I've been sending that website out as a place to get updates as well as input comments as well. So we've been really blasting the website.
That's excellent to hear. So can you share with us maybe how many comments you've gotten? Or I'm just kind of looking for some, some statistics. What percentage of people have responded over, say, via Facebook? You have a certain number of followers. Have you gotten new followers or new comments? If so, by what percentage?
Gotcha. Yep. So with the emailing, we don't have I would say there's about a 5% response. It's not a bunch of responses, but 5% response via email. And then through phone conversations, we've left a lot of voicemails. I would say about 35% to 40% voicemails that we're leaving and then following up with. And then following that, we're getting about, we were having some good conversations from the folks that I've been working with, and they're saying, I believe that they're having longer than 1 minute conversations with about 20%. So I tell them to tell me if they have like a longer than 1 minute conversation, because usually that's when someone's really engaged.
Yeah, that's really
And we
fantastic.
try to put them on another list to reach back out a couple more times.
Yes, and for other things too, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you've got a really good response. Can you share with us maybe, one or two or even three key takeaways that we might, think about or consider as a part of our thinking?
Yes, so we haven't gotten a lot of folks that are actually using us to give us feedback, in particular on, the actual maps, but we're getting more feedback on process, so they're asking us, when's the next meeting? Not necessarily giving us a lot of feedback on the maps.
Okay.
I think our initial goal, was to take meetings out into the field as best we could and closer to them. And so I think the challenge that we were facing by starting as late as we had to start in this, I think is, what I kept hearing is, well, couldn't you have done this earlier? Why couldn't we start a year ago? Or why are we, why is this just happening now? And so I think there's some kind of misunderstanding. And so maybe one of the takeaways or a lesson for the future is, could you at least start some awareness around, hey, this is coming, it's coming up, starting at 6, I think people are aware, they know it's happening the federal level and at the state level. They don't realize that it's also happening at the county level. And so maybe 6 months out, there's some, kind of introduction to it. And then 3 months out, there's some kind of reminder, hey, this is coming up. And then as we get into it, hopefully you don't have this compressed, couple week process timeline, and you actually do have a 3 to 4 month process.
Sure. So I think the key takeaway there is that 9.5 years from now, we should start a public education campaign to let people be able to connect this to the census and understand the waterfall effect. Thanks.
And I can even add, that's exactly what some community leaders said to me. They were like, that's not, like, we want to learn more because they don't understand completely. So some of the Facebook posts. So thanks for that. I think it's really helpful.
The other thing that I think, that I've noticed in learning just as we've been going is that the public does rely on their council member, to the point of the council member is who's out there, and they do. So you saw there were at least 4 comments, I think, specifically about in the initial maps, moving Rocky River out of District 1. And so if the public has a concern, oftentimes they're turning to their council member to voice that and say, hey, and we've heard from other councilmen, mayors have reached out to them and said, please don't do anything to change this, and don't split our cities, or don't put us with a different council person where, we have a working relationship there. So that's remembering that they are a vehicle or a voice for them.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Ms. Hinton on the outreach portion? Well, thank you for that work, and thank you for your report.
Thank you.
And just one other additional update. There it is. So as you know, we changed the URL, or simplified the URL to make it more accessible for folks and easier to find. I will say that being able to tell people as we're doing our outreach, either through email blast, Facebook, everything, all of our communications, to drive them to the website, so that having it as a repository and a hub for all of this information, and having the county being able to post this stuff almost in real time, very quickly. We're turning stuff over to them, and sometimes within an hour, it's already up on the website. And so that has been extremely helpful for folks, and having that as that kind of access to information. So there is some new stuff that, like we did add the 2020 census data as an Excel document in there. We had a request for that from a couple different folks. There's a media center that's in there that's putting our press releases and articles and any other additional information that we are putting out on a regular basis. And then we've added some new kind of highlights on the homepage, showing the map options, the census data. So they should be relatively easy to find for folks. So I just want to make sure you're aware that that is happening on an ongoing basis.
And we will need to update to add our Monday meeting onto the website as well.
Yes, because that's not on our information.
Any questions from commissioners on the website? Yes, Mr. Lumpkin.
Mr. Lumpkin, your microphone, please.
This past Monday, we had the meeting with the statewide people here. Is there a necessity to also to include some of that information on the website about what's happening, what the current status is so that people will have the ability to know what's going on throughout the state?
I think we could certainly add a link. They have a website the state has set up. We could add the link to the state website as well. If there's additional information, I think we would be able to add that. If there's something specific on top of their link that we should add, I don't think it would be a problem to add that. So,
does that address your concern, Ken? Does adding a link address your concern?
Oh yeah, having a link definitely would give an option. That's all. Another option.
I think that's a good point. There may be people who navigate to this site and they're looking for information about the Cuyahoga County House or Senate districts. And so having that link and saying for information on the state process of redistricting.
They could stumble upon it by doing that. And but we should make sure it's on the homepage is the only thing I would add, because if it's buried, then it doesn't serve that purpose.
Other comments or questions? All right, Mr. Rusnak, thank you. We'll see you tomorrow at 3, and I'm sure your team's going to be busy between now and 3. tomorrow. Is there any miscellaneous business that any commissioner wants to bring forward at this time? Anyone? No? Okay, well, we do have 2 more meetings to get to a plan. So we will be back in session in less than 24 hours. At this point, we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
So moved by Ms. Morgan, seconded by Ms. Murphy. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. We are adjourned.